Hello, everybody. This week we are talking about education and housing. So we're in the part of the class where we're talking about how do we identify and dismantle these structural barriers that are built into our system to try and unclog those sort of ideas and thoughts so that we can reach health equity, knowing that health is much more than just going to the doctor, right? So this week we are talking about structural barriers of education and housing. This is a huge topic with lots of stuff. You have a lot of videos this week, so I'm going to keep this pretty short. I will say, if you enjoy the book Fire in the Ashes that we're reading for this class, Jonathan Kozol has also written a book called Savage Inequalities. The pictures of the book is on the front page of the lecture slides. That one's specifically about education, and so if you've liked this book and you want to read more sort of about educational disparities and how that has an effect on people's lifespan and life trajectory, I would really recommend that book. It's really good. It's actually the one I read first before I read Fire in the Ashes. And I think it's a great book. And so just as a recommendation, could be a beyond the classroom activity if you want to just whip on through it. Another thing to remind you is the Fire in the Ashes analysis paper. The outline is coming up. Really, it's just looking at one of the characters from the book and then sort of talking about the health conditions that they had or might develop post sort of the book, and then thinking about sort of what kind of solutions could have been presented in that kid or person's life to be able to change sort of the health disparities that they might have experienced. So this week, the big topics that we're going to talk about is redlining. It's a topic that a lot of people have never heard about, but once people hear about it, it's like all sorts of big picture ideas and things start to come into view. And so there's a really great video about redlining. What is it? What is the history of it? And how does that affect us still today, even though redlining is technically not a thing? From there, we'll also talk about gentrification, which is an advanced sort of aspect of housing inequality, how people move and live and sort of, again, about this place and where people live and how that affects their health. And so there is there's a video there and an article to pair with that. From there, we'll talk about environmental justice and environmental racism. This has come up in the Fire in the Ashes book, but we'll talk more sort of directly about it this week with a video about environmental racism. And then there are some paired articles as well, thinking about sort of, is this something that still happens? Yes, of course it does. But what is the sort of data? What is the information that we have? For every one of the videos this week, I have a paired sort of popular news, popular press article. So you can see sort of, here's the big picture sort of history idea, but also here's what it looks like today here in this country. The next part will be watching some videos about sort of our educational history. Probably most of you have heard Brown versus the Board of Education. That is the ruling that desegregated our schools, that said black and white kids could go to school together. It happened only 65 years ago, which I think is something that is relevant to think about. For a lot of people, they think like, oh, it was, like so long ago. But actually, my dad was born in a time when segregation was still the norm. And so if my dad was a kid during segregation, that's really not that long ago. Once you get a grip sort of on the bigger picture of Brown versus education, we're going to talk about busing. Busing is an important sort of thing. It's something that continues to go on in some aspects in this country, and there's been some fights around there. And so you'll watch a video and listen to sort of the effects about busing and how it was used to force desegregation in schools and what has happened since then, and how does all of that sort of translate into health disparities. Finally, the last piece that I want to talk about is educational funding. When we think about sort of education, it's one of the biggest markers of socialism in our country. Socialism being it's something that's paid for through taxes that everybody receives regardless of ability to pay. And so public education is one of our number one socialism sort of projects. However, we're not a socialist country, right? We're a capitalist country. And so part of that is that we do see unequal funding in our schools, because a large percentage of our school funding comes from property taxes, and property taxes are definitely not socialist in value. Property taxes are absolutely capitalist in value. And so what we see with our current school systems is this idea of like school is for everybody, which is a very socialist sort of idea, with but the money that funds them is very much based on sort of capitalistic ideas. And then those two come together, and that's where we see a lot of inequality in our schools, because of the meeting of these two sort of things. And so when I talk about sort of where you live and where you go to school as being fundamental predictors of your health outcomes, and sort of your life trajectory, they really are built into the system in terms of thinking about how does this impact your life. Again, I have some articles for you to look at in terms of thinking about these sort of pictures. If you're somebody who's born in a poor neighborhood and you go to poor schools, what is the likelihood that you're going to have stellar health? What is the likelihood that you're going to grow up to be rich and have really great health outcomes? Well, yes, it's a possibility, right? Because that's what the U.S. system is possibility. But the likelihood and the ability for that to be achieved, pretty slim to none, right? And so that's why this week is a really foundational sort of part in terms of talking about sort of how are these things built into the system to create these long-term sort of health inequalities that we see throughout our system that persist throughout people's lives. All right, lots of videos this week, so hopefully you will enjoy them, learn some stuff. I think this is one of my favorite weeks of the semester because it is such important information that so many people have not seen or heard about up until this point. All right, have a good week. Bye.